They won't scream it and they won't say it out loud. When a narcissist truly begins to hate you, it's not with words. It's not even with an obvious act of rage. It's quieter than that, colder, more deliberate, and far more dangerous. It's in the way they stop seeing you as a person. It's in the way their eyes no longer reflect your humanity. It's in the small, subtle ways they begin to erase you emotionally, psychologically, socially. The biggest sign that a narcissist hates you is when they start trying to devalue your existence, not your achievements, not your looks, not even your mistakes, but you. They stop wanting to control you through love or validation. Instead, they want to destroy the meaning of your presence in their world. You become a mirror they can no longer tolerate, a reflection of what they'll never be. When you start standing in your truth, when you stop feeding their ego, and when you refuse to bend under their manipulation, that's when their hatred begins. It's not born from strength. It's born from fragility. You've exposed their illusion, and that's something the narcissist cannot forgive. They never start by shouting. The narcissist's hatred begins in silence, cold, deliberate, and unnervingly calm. It's not the kind of silence that offers peace, but the kind that chills the air around you. You'll feel it first, long before you can name it. Something changes in their eyes. Something hardens in their tone. The warmth that once drew you and turns to indifference, so sharp it cuts deeper than any insult. This isn't because you failed them. It's because you stopped feeding them. You stopped being their mirror, their emotional supply, their reflection of false perfection. And now they don't know how to exist around you. A narcissist's admiration is never genuine. It's transactional. They admire you because you provide something they crave: attention, validation, power, admiration. But the moment you stop giving that, the moment you begin to stand in your truth, they feel the loss like oxygen leaving their lungs. Their adoration collapses into resentment. What once felt like affection now becomes a weapon. You're no longer their source. You're their threat. This hatred isn't born from strength. It's born from fear. When you stop reflecting back their illusion of superiority, you expose the truth they spend their entire life avoiding. Underneath the mask is insecurity, shame, and emptiness. And when you see that truth, they know they've lost control of the narrative. To them, losing control feels like death. So they retaliate, not with open war, but with quiet destruction. They'll begin to rewrite the story of you. The same traits they once praised, they'll now condemn. Your confidence becomes arrogance. Your kindness becomes manipulation. Your success becomes luck. Every word, every gesture, every moment that once made them proud of you will be used as ammunition. They need to diminish you to make sense of their own collapse. Hatred becomes their way of reclaiming control by convincing themselves you were never as valuable as they once believed. This is where the emotional sabotage begins. They'll minimize your feelings, mock your vulnerability, or dismiss your experiences as drama. They'll act disinterested, as though you've suddenly lost all significance. You'll feel invisible, like your existence barely registers to them. But don't be fooled. Their indifference isn't real. It's strategy. It's the mask they wear to hide how deeply your independence wounds them. Because the truth is, they still need you to notice. They need you to react, to chase, to explain, to plead. Every reaction you give is proof they still matter. But when you don't react, when you maintain your calm and refuse to chase, something inside them breaks even further. This stage can be confusing because their behavior feels contradictory. One moment they act like you don't exist. The next they throw subtle jabs, spread rumors, or find ways to insert themselves into your life. That's how you know you've become more powerful than they can admit. If you truly didn't matter, they wouldn't need to erase you. The very effort they spend pretending you're nothing is proof that you are still everything to their fragile ego. Their hatred is grief disguised as cruelty. They grieve the version of you that kept them comfortable, the version that admired them, the version that believed their charm was real. But you've grown. You've seen behind the mask, and they can't handle the version of you that no longer kneels to their illusion. So they try to destroy what they can't control. Don't mistake this for genuine hatred. It's not personal, it's projection. Their loathing isn't directed at who you are, it's aimed at what you represent. You remind them of everything they'll never be. Self-aware, grounded, empathetic, real. You are proof that healing exists. And to someone who lives behind a mask, that kind of authenticity is unbearable. Control is the narcissist's lifeline. It's not just something they enjoy, it's how they survive. To them, control equals safety, validation, and identity. Without it, they crumble. Every relationship they form is built around one silent rule. I must have power over how you feel, think, and respond. So when that control begins to slip away, when you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop defending, they don't just feel rejected, they feel erased. That's when the hatred begins to bloom. At first, they might pretend they don't notice the change. They'll act unaffected, as if your silence doesn't bother them. But underneath that calm exterior is panic. Narcissists feed on emotional energy. The prey is the argument, even your pain. It doesn't matter whether the energy is positive or negative. It's all fuel. It reminds them that they still have influence over you. When you pull back, you cut off that fuel supply, you starve them of attention, and in that starvation, their true self, the insecure, wounded, frightened self, starts to show. That's something they'll do anything to hide. So the moment you stop reacting, the narcissist begins a different kind of war. It's not always loud or visible. It's psychological. They'll try to bait you with accusations, subtle insults, or guilt trips. They might say things like, "You've changed," or "You don't care anymore," trying to draw emotion from you. If that doesn't work, they'll shift tactics. They'll turn others against you. They'll tell half-truths, distort stories, and play the victim so that you're painted as the cold, heartless one. This is the beginning of their smear campaign, a desperate attempt to regain control through reputation and perception. But what's really happening underneath the surface is fear. They're terrified of the power shift that's taking place for the first time. They're not the one dictating your emotions. They can no longer predict your reactions. And unpredictability to a narcissist feels like chaos. The more you detach, the more they unravel. That unraveling often looks like anger, gossip, or emotional outbursts, but at its core, it's panic. They are losing their supply and their ego is collapsing. And here's what's most important to understand. Their hatred is not a sign that you've done something wrong. It's proof that you've done something right. The moment they start to resent you for pulling away, you know the cycle is breaking. Your healing threatens the very foundation of their control. You're showing them that their manipulation no longer works, that their charm no longer blinds you, and that their approval no longer defines you. That realization is unbearable to them. They'll try to convince themselves and everyone around them that you're the problem. They'll tell people you're unstable, disloyal, or not who they thought you were. They do this not because they believe it, but because they need to rewrite the story in a way that restores their power. They can't stand the idea that you were strong enough to walk away. In their world, leaving them is an act of betrayal. In reality, it's an act of freedom. You'll know you've broken their control when their tactics lose their effectiveness. The guilt trips don't sting anymore. The silent treatment doesn't scare you. The manipulation starts to sound rehearsed and empty. That's when they panic the most. Their hatred intensifies because now they realize the one thing they've always feared. You don't need them. Their hatred, though it feels cruel, is actually confession. It says, "You matter more than I'll ever admit." It says, "You were stronger than I expected." It says, "I've lost the power I built my identity on." Every time they try to provoke you, understand that it's not about the words they're saying, it's about the control they're trying to regain. The best response you can give is none. Your calmness is their defeat. Every time you stay grounded, every time you refuse to feed the chaos, you reclaim a little more of yourself. Let them hate you. It's just their ego screaming for oxygen. You are no longer trapped in their cycle. You've taken back your power, and that loss of control is what they'll never forgive. When a narcissist begins to hate you, they don't declare war with loud words or open hostility. Their weapon is more insidious devaluation. It's the slow, deliberate process of dismantling your worth piece by piece until you begin to question your own value. This isn't accidental. It's a survival strategy. To them, your strength, empathy, and confidence are threats. the more authentic you are, the more dangerous you become. So they attack your self-image to make you small enough to control. Again, the devaluation phase often begins right after you've shown independence. Maybe you set a boundary, spoke your truth, or simply stopped prioritizing their needs above your own. That single act of self-respect disrupts the balance they've built. The narcissist thrives when you revolve around them, when your self-worth depends on their validation. When you no longer seek that validation, you take away their emotional authority. That's when the rewriting begins. Everything they once praised becomes a target. The traits that drew them to you, your warmth, your strength, your emotional intelligence, now become flaws in their narrative. You're no longer caring. You're too emotional. You're not driven. You're obsessed. You're not honest. You're cruel. These twisted narratives serve one purpose: to make you doubt yourself. Because if you start questioning who you are, you'll turn back toward them for reassurance. And that's how they reestablish control. What's particularly painful about this phase is its subtlety. They don't always insult you outright. Sometimes it's a sarcastic joke disguised as humor. Sometimes it's a faint eye roll when you speak. Sometimes it's quiet comparison. Not everyone overreacts like you do. It's death by 1,000 tiny emotional cuts. Over time, you start shrinking, apologizing more, trying harder until you find yourself walking on eggshells just to avoid another blow. That's exactly where they want you. Small, uncertain, compliant. But here's the truth. The devaluation has nothing to do with your worth. It's about their fear of your growth. Narcissists can't tolerate emotional equality. They need to feel superior to maintain their fragile sense of self. When they sense that you're growing stronger, more self-assured, more independent, they perceive it as betrayal. Their hatred for you is really hatred for their own powerlessness. This is why the devaluation often escalates when you start healing. As you become more grounded, they'll push harder, trying to destabilize you. They might accuse you of being the narcissist, call you manipulative, or claim you've changed. They project their insecurities onto you because facing their own flaws is unbearable. Every cruel word, every passive-aggressive jab, every attempt to undermine your confidence, it's all projection. They're describing themselves, not you. In these moments, it's easy to internalize their cruelty. You might start wondering, am I really the problem? That's the trap. Once you start defending yourself, they've regained control. The key to surviving this phase is awareness. Recognize that their words are not reflections of truth. They're symptoms of fear. You've become the mirror that exposes who they are. And rather than face that reflection, they're trying to shatter the glass. So don't absorb their devaluation, observe it. Each insult, each attempt to belittle you is confirmation that they're losing their grip. The more they attack your worth, the clearer it becomes that your strength threatens them. If you weren't powerful, they wouldn't feel the need to tear you down. In time, you'll come to see that their hatred is a sign of your growth. You've become something they can't manipulate. Someone self-aware, independent, and emotionally untouchable. The devaluation is not the end of your story. It's the narcissist's last attempt to rewrite it. Don't hand them the pen. Stand in your truth, even when they try to distort it. Because the moment you stop believing their version of you is the moment their power ends. And that is when your healing truly begins. You were never hated for your flaws. You were hated for your reflection. What the narcissist sees in you is everything they pretend to be. Genuine, grounded, self-aware, capable of real love. You are the living proof of what they can only imitate. From the very beginning, they mirrored your light, borrowing your empathy, your warmth, your authenticity, and presenting it back to you as if it were theirs. That's how they made you trust them. But the moment you begin to recognize your own strength, the moment you start seeing the difference between real and counterfeit, the illusion breaks. That's when the hatred begins. Narcissists don't hate you because you hurt them. They hate you because you see them. To be truly seen as unbearable for them, because their entire identity is built on performance. They live in masks, the charming, confident, successful facade that hides their deep insecurity. You, however, have seen the cracks. You've seen the manipulations, the contradictions, the fragile ego underneath the arrogance. And once you've seen the truth, they can no longer control how you perceive them. That loss of perception feels like death to their ego. They start resenting you, not for what you've done, but for what you know. You've seen the weakness behind the confidence, the cruelty behind the charm, the emptiness behind the love. You've glimpsed their core, and it's hollow. You've witnessed the person they spend their entire life running from. And that's why they can't stand your presence anymore. Every time they look at you, they're forced to see themselves through your eyes. And that reflection is intolerable. So they start trying to destroy the mirror. They'll project their flaws onto you, calling you controlling, selfish, or dramatic. They'll twist the narrative so that you appear to be the toxic one. This is how they protect themselves, by making you the villain in their story. They cannot afford for the world to see the truth, so they go on the offensive. They smear your name, distort your intentions, and try to convince others that you were the problem all along. It's not about you. It's about survival. But even as they attack, what they're truly doing is confessing. Every accusation they throw at you is an admission of their own behavior. Every time they call you manipulative, what they're really saying is, you've seen through my manipulation. Every time they call you selfish, they're revealing how deeply they resent your boundaries. You've broken the unspoken rule of the narcissist. You stop playing your assigned role. You stop being the admiring audience to their performance. And now, without your validation, the performance means nothing. What makes this phase even more twisted is that beneath all their hatred, there's still obsession. They can't stop watching you. Even as they pretend you don't exist, they're secretly keeping tabs. Through social media, mutual friends, or quiet observation. They need to know what you're doing, who you're with, how you're living. Because if you're thriving, it confirms their greatest fear, that they never had the power they thought they did. If you're at peace, it means you've escaped the illusion. And that kind of freedom burns them more than any revenge ever could. They'll say they don't care. They'll act as though you're irrelevant. But that indifference is not real. It's a mask to hide the humiliation of being exposed. Because even now, even in their silence, you live rent-free in their mind. The more they try to erase you, the more proof there is that they can't. You've become the ghost they can't silence, the reflection they can't destroy. The narcissist's greatest hatred doesn't come from rejection. It comes from irrelevance. When you no longer react, no longer defend yourself, no longer feed their need for validation, you become something they can't control. Silence. And silence to a narcissist is annihilation. They thrive on attention. Whether admiration or outrage, it doesn't matter. To them, being seen, talked about, or emotionally engaged with is oxygen. So when you step out of their emotional orbit and stop responding to their provocations, they start to suffocate. Your peace becomes their punishment. At first, they'll try to pull you back in with familiar tricks. You might notice sudden bursts of affection, unexpected apologies, or dramatic displays of emotion. These are not genuine acts of remorse. They're strategies of control. Narcissists don't apologize to heal. They apologize to reset the cycle. They want to reignite your empathy because once you care again, you're back under their influence. But if you've learned the pattern, you'll sense the manipulation beneath the words. When they realize you're not falling for it this time, that's when their desperation transforms into hatred. They'll begin to test the boundaries of your silence. Maybe they'll send a message meant to provoke or use mutual connections to drop your name in conversation. If you still don't respond, they escalate, spreading rumors, twisting the truth, painting themselves as the victim of your coldness. What you're witnessing is their ego imploding. The narcissist cannot tolerate the idea that they no longer matter to you. They've built their entire sense of worth around the ability to control how others feel about them. When that control disappears, they lose the illusion of superiority they depend on. In your absence, they start to unravel. Without your reactions to feed on, they must face the emptiness within themselves. The very void they've been avoiding their entire lives. And this is why your silence feels like hatred to them. It mirrors the emotional emptiness they try to bury beneath arrogance and manipulation. You're not punishing them. You're simply refusing to play. But to a narcissist, that feels like destruction. They will try to provoke you back into engagement. They might flaunt new relationships, exaggerate their success, or act as though they've completely moved on. But beneath the facade, they're watching to see if you notice. Every post, every story, every whispered rumor is bait, because if you react even with anger, it confirms that they still matter. That's how they measure power. So the greatest revenge, though it was never your goal, is indifference. When they realize your world no longer revolves around them, their illusion of control disintegrates. This is the phase where their hatred becomes most visible. They may lash out with cruel words, passive-aggressive comments, or attempts to sabotage your reputation. But these are not signs of strength, they're signs of panic. Their ego is collapsing and they're grasping at anything to restore their sense of importance. The irony is that the more they hate you, the more power you actually hold, because their hatred is still an attachment. They can't stop thinking about you, can't stop reacting to your peace. You've become a reminder of everything they lost. Not because you were cruel, but because you healed. What they can't understand is that your silence isn't revenge. It's self-respect. It's the decision to no longer live in reaction to someone else's dysfunction. And that's what makes you untouchable. The narcissist can twist stories, rewrite history, or pretend they've won, but deep down they know the truth. You've moved beyond them. You no longer need their approval, attention, or validation. You've become emotionally independent, and that is something they'll never be. Hatred is the narcissist's final act of recognition. It's the only emotion left when admiration and control no longer work. But what most people misunderstand is that a narcissist's hatred is not rooted in power, it's rooted in loss. When a narcissist hates you, it means they've realized something they can't unsee. They no longer have the ability to affect you. You've escaped their emotional gravity. And for someone who survives on control, that loss feels like death. So they don't just hate you, they grieve the version of themselves that had power over you. This is why their hatred often looks like obsession. They'll stalk your life quietly, checking your social media, asking mutual friends about you, keeping tabs under the guise of indifference. It's not love, it's fixation. They need to know how you're doing because your peace serves as proof that they've lost their grip. Every time they see you happy, calm, or thriving, it reinforces their failure. They can't admit that openly, so they transform that humiliation into hatred. Hatred becomes the shield they hide behind, the only way to avoid acknowledging that you've become untouchable. But here's the paradox. Even in their hatred, they're still orbiting you. Their identity was once built around dominating your emotions. When you detach, they don't just lose you, they lose their reflection. For so long, you mirrored back the image they wanted to believe about themselves: admired, powerful, desired. Without your reflection, they have to confront their emptiness. So instead of looking inward, they externalize it, projecting the blame onto you. They convince themselves that you're cruel, fake, or ungrateful. That narrative allows them to hold onto their ego while avoiding the truth. You were the source of the stability they pretended to possess. Their hatred becomes a twisted form of dependency. They need it to feel alive, to maintain the illusion that you still matter enough to hate. Because if they were truly indifferent, it would mean you've become irrelevant. And nothing terrifies a narcissist more than irrelevance. So their rage, their bitterness, their obsessive criticism, it's all proof that your detachment is working. You've taken away their power supply. And now they're left with the emotional residue of their own emptiness. It's in this phase that many survivors make the mistake of feeling pity or responsibility. You see their pain, their erratic behavior, their loneliness, and a part of you may want to help. But understand this, the narcissist's suffering isn't a path to healing. It's a performance meant to pull you back in. They don't want growth, they want control. Their hatred only turns to false vulnerability when they believe it might open the door again. But the moment you show compassion, they'll twist it into opportunity. You can't heal someone who refuses to look at their own wounds. The most powerful response to their hatred isn't anger, it's detachment. When you stop taking their words personally, when you stop needing to prove your innocence or goodness, You reclaim your peace. The narcissist can't survive in an environment where they're not being emotionally fed. Your neutrality starves them of the reaction they crave. They'll try everything, provoke guilt or charm, but nothing is more unsettling to them than calm indifference. It's the ultimate declaration that their influence no longer defines you. Over time, their hatred will consume them. They'll rewrite the story 1,000 times in their mind, always making you the villain because admitting the truth that you saw through them and survived is unbearable. You'll move on, but they'll stay stuck in that emotional loop, fighting ghosts of their own creation. And though they'll never admit it, a part of them will always envy you. Your peace, your resilience, your ability to feel deeply without losing yourself. So when you wonder if their hatred means you've done something wrong, remember this. Hatred from a narcissist is confirmation that you've healed. It means you've broken free from their emotional maze and stepped into your own power. Their hatred is not a curse. It's a confession that your light exposed their darkness and that you had the courage to walk away when they couldn't follow.